guess here we go. Welcome everybody to the first episode of Wonky Weekly.
I'm Rashaan James II.
And I'm Sid Solomon. Let's get wonky.
Don't.
No, is that stupid? Should we not do that? I think we should leave that exactly as is. So, hi Rashaan.
Hi.
So, Rashaan, you and I, we've been friends for a while. We've known each other since 2016. And this project, Wonky Weekly, as we're calling it, is really your idea. This was something that you sort of tossed to me like in a text message a couple of months ago, and now we're actually doing it. So, first of all, who are you, and what are we doing here?
Oh man, those are a lot of questions.
They are.
I am an Eastern Chorus counselor for the National Council for Actors Equity Association, and what I do and what my thing I have loved since I've been a counselor is to get information out. And I sat next to this super wonky dude my first time in council, and then I sat next to him for about a year. His name is Sid Solomon.
Good looking guy. Yeah, I've met him. He's nice.
No, can we redact that from the no, and I felt like the two of us have a really great rapport of wonkiness about certain things, but then certain personality traits that really are really great for each other. So I was like, how do we put this together so the membership can get something from it? And Wonky Weekly is what we're doing right now.
Yeah, and I, like Rashaan, I served on Equity's National Council from 2015 to 2020, first as an Eastern Principal Counselor, and then for 2 years as Eastern Regional Vice President. And yeah, I will always remember Rashaan got elected for the first time a year after I did. I started in 2015, he was in 2016, and I didn't know him, we'd never met before, and he just sat down next to me in council and said hi. And it was I don't know, it was magic. It was love at first sight. It was, we clicked, we got along. And it was we come from such different backgrounds in sort of every kind of way. And there's this whole trove of knowledge that you have that I don't, and vice versa. And we sort of very naturally always leaned on each other in terms of help me understand this thing that I'm not getting. And also, I think, like you said, we both have this sort of passion for both understanding the really nitty-gritty stuff as deeply as we can and being as wonky as we possibly can, but also finding ways to translate that to a broader audience, and specifically Equity's membership. Unions are really complicated. They're governed by laws and policies and rules, and it's I think an unreasonable expectation for every single one of any union's members to understand all of that.
Absolutely.
But if people like you and me can, share what we have in a way that, sort of a broader audience can understand, I think that's great. And knowledge is power, and empowerment is what we're looking to do in unions. The more knowledge and power we have together, the more collective leverage and power we have to negotiate with our employers. So week number 1, episode number 1, what are we talking about, Rashaan?
We are talking about the committee reforms that just happened, how we have changed how people can participate in equity in a much better way.
Yes. So, committees. Committees are a big part of basically any union's governing structure. Unions, whether they're national unions like Equity or local unions within a national structure, they might have a big, top-level governing body like Equity's National Council, but typically they're also going to be committees sitting underneath that, typically designed to be smaller groups of people who specialize in a specific topic and can make recommendations to the larger governing body about a specific idea. Let's talk about, first of all, what has been the structure of committees at Equity and why, I guess in your opinion, Rashaan, you're still on the National Council. How have committees worked, and why did you think that they needed to change, if you did at all?
Cool. I think the way that Equity has before did committees is that we had lots and lots of them. We had over 100 of them. Mm-hmm. My third year on council, I remember we added the 100th committee, and then we've added several since then until the committee reforms. And what we were doing is we thought that participation was easiest if we did it through the committee structure. Through analyzing that, not only through the lens of do our members only want that, but also like, is this the best way of participation? We found that the answer is no to both of those questions. That when we tell a member, hey, you have something you want to say, join a committee, that's not actually what they wanted to do. They want to participate or find a different way to do so that's not in our governance structure. So later on, I'll talk about the other ways to participate. But when it came to committees, committees should do exactly what you said. They are the tentacles of the bigger body of the National Council that get work done and need to do it efficiently. The first thing we did with committees is that we got rid of a lot of them. A lot of them that just like, some of them were literally just staff driven committees where we had members at large kind of convening, but all the work was really being done by staff anyway. And the other thing is we made the committees smaller. We've learned that like huge committees don't work. Like there's a sweet spot somewhere in between 10 people and 35 people. And somewhere in there is a really great group of people that can make some decisions.
I have to stop you. The reason I'm laughing, but I mean, I'm not sure if everybody watching is going to have a sense of when we're talking about how big committees have been. I mean, we're talking like upwards of 150 people sitting on a committee. Equity's National Council, its top level governing body is 83 people. So in some cases, you're talking about committees that are more than twice the size of the governing body. So twice, and like you said, size of a committee is directly proportionate to the unwieldiness of that committee. And that's not anybody's fault other than there are a lot of people who have a lot of thoughts and a finite amount of time. So 10 to 35, somewhere in there being a sweet spot, that is a big change for how things are going to work within the committee structure. All right, so you've talked about fewer committees, first and foremost. You've talked about smaller committees. What else? What else is changing?
And just so the sizes are out there, for our counselor-only committees, there are several of them. There are 17. For our non-contractual committees, I believe it's 30 people on the committee. And then for the national contract committees, it's 33 people. So like between 17 and 33. And each chair can decide like, if I'm not going to max out my committee, I'm going to stop at 25, even though I have 33. That's great. And like what I learned during this whole process is a lot of these committees of what are the equivalent to our national council and other unions only have the board members on them. We have decided, and we kept this, and we didn't make this change, that members at large also participate. I think somewhere along the line, we found that members participating was great, and we told them, hey, if you want to participate, join a committee. Mm-hmm. So the next part was, well, what if I don't want to join a committee? And out of that came action teams in equity communities. Mm-hmm. So we have 2 action teams currently. We have the member education and engagement action team, which is basically our member ed committee is being moved into an action team where it can focus on member-to-member engagement, but also staff-to-member engagement, and even council-to-member engagement in a way that we weren't able to before. The member education and engagement action team can work on things that are not necessarily about policy. So committees are for policy and governance. Action teams they can affect policy and in governance, but they are actually for member-to-member engagement. Mm-hmm. And they're to change culture and to help us understand each other a lot more.
So I just want to go back and make sure I've got all of these things clear. So committees remain governance. And you're right. And this is something we have discussed forever about being frustrated about, that when a member shows up to get involved and says, I'm interested in helping, the only thing we've ever been taught to tell them is join a committee. And committees, you and I have both chaired committees as counselors. Committee work very often is tedious.
Yes.
And I've found myself on a number of occasions chairing a committee, apologizing to the members, being like, this is boring. Now, that's important work. And you and I are nutso enough to really, really enjoy that work. But it's not the only way in which people should be able to, be in solidarity with their fellow members and help advance their union and what it's able to do in the world. And we have been in this sort of place where it's the only thing we ever recommend to people, the only thing we feel we have to offer them. So if you are a person who wants to get into the nitty-gritty, committees are a place for you. Action teams, you're saying, are more about member-to-member engagement, not necessarily in the sort of rigid, we will call a meeting when we need some policy advice, but more about ways in which members can effectuate change and, when it comes to, say, member education, engage on a one-on-one or collective basis to learn more about what it means to be an equity member, about a union member. That all makes sense to me. Communities, though, I've heard a lot about this. I will say, and I've seen in the list of, say, equity communities and equity committees, there are some things that feel like overlap. That's the place where I'm not 100% sure what's going on. So talk to me about an equity community and what it means.
Awesome. So some of the communities are in fact overlapping because there's still a committee that has to do governance work that is a part of it. But some of them are completely turned into an equity community when it used to be a committee, like Young Workers. What we found, I was third vice chair of Young Workers, and I was all for Young Workers becoming a committee when it did because of how we thought in equity at the time. And then the work that we started to do felt less like governance work and more like something else. Mm-hmm. At that point, we weren't ready to define that. We hadn't started the work of doing this committee reform. And once we got into it, we were like, oh, that's what this is. This is a way for young workers to participate in a way that isn't governance. Basically, they are able to do the things what I called during a lot of the meetings, the fun stuff, the things that people want to show up and do to be a part of the community of equity. I'm going to be the counselor leader for the LGBTQ plus community. And where we are right now is that I don't have expectations of what this community will look like until I get in the group of people who will be on this community, and we will talk and say, what would you like to do? What are the things that you've always wanted to do? I'll tell you what I've wanted to do. I specifically remember sitting in the EEO committee, and we talked about the New York City Gay Pride Parade. How do we get members there? And it was full stop, we can't. So what this does is, in my world of worlds, in my dream, every single gay pride parade where we have members, go. We will organize and we will go there and we will hold an equity sign that has all of the rainbows on it, and we are going to be gay equity members, we are going to be lesbian equity members, we are going to be trans equity members out there representing equity, but also representing the type of people who we are. The communities also allows us to not only singularly identify as equity members, it allows us to identify as something else. This month, being Black History Month, which is awesome, our first community that will have its meeting is the BIPOC members. Mm-hmm. James A. Williams is the community leader for that, the counselor leader for that, and he's going to be amazing. Mm-hmm. I'm really excited to see what they're going to look like, and it'll be a little bit different for how the members with disabilities will look like, or the principals will look like. So each group defines itself. My heart of hearts tells me that the first thing I want to do when I sit down and have this meeting with my fellow LGBTQ members and talk is to say, what do you want to call this?
Sure.
Name it.
Like you said, when we were around when the Young Workers Committee was created, and you and I, we were huge proponents of that, even in the face of like some resistance. And I think it's so astute of you to say that we only ever imagined it as a committee because the committees were the only things there were. We wanted a place where young workers could come together in solidarity to discuss things that were important to us. The only avenue we had for that was a committee. Problem with that, of course, is that like committees are for a really specific thing. Committees are supposed to be advising the governing body on policy. I wanted there to be space in which young workers who, for most of the history of equity, have not really had a place to go and be in solidarity with each other to do something, which I imagine, depending on how those things, each of them individually turns out, might eventually end up bleeding into policy. If interesting conversations happen in communities where their consensus builds around, boy, this is a way the union could be serving us through its contracts or through its policies that it's not yet, and then there's a very easy route for those discussions to move into the governance sphere, but they don't have to exist solely for that.
Yes, and that is the one direction, the direction of the community being able to have a counselor who's a leader who has a voice on council to say this is something that needs to go into governance. But also there's the opposite direction. If I have the stage managers committee, and we have been working on something that is the LORT contract, and there's a specific rule, and there's one stage manager who's worked out of the small committee who's worked it. And the community, we can dip into the community and say, hey, all you stage managers who have ever worked LORT, we have this question for you. Because we already have access to those people because they've told us, yes, we would like to participate, but we would like to participate on our own terms. But they will more than likely open an email that says, hey, you are a stage manager who worked LORT. But there's nowhere that we know that yet because we don't have members participating that way yet.
Let me ask you some questions about makeup of these various groups. The way that committee population worked is that there was a chair of a committee. Every committee had a chair, and chairs always had to be members of the National Council or non-councillor members of the Central Regional Board. Is that still true, that committee chairs need to still be elected?
That is still true, with the caveat that if it is a contractual committee, they must have worked it.
When it comes to the makeup of the committees, the way it used to work is that committee chairs would select the people that they wanted to be members of the committee. Again, there didn't used to be a cap on how many people could serve on a committee generally. If the committee chair wanted them on the committee, they would submit that for approval for a national committee, that would go to the National Council for a vote. For a regional committee, it would go to the regional board for a vote. Is that still the process for committee population?
That is still the process, except the application is a lot more, there are a lot more things involved inside of the application. Before, you would print out the sheet and it was your name, your member number, which committee, that's pretty much it. There wasn't really much more. Now what we're doing is to not only make sure that we have like diversity of voices on each committee, we also want to make sure that we know who these people are as they're joining committees. So that will go to the chair. The chair will make their approvals. And then from there, it goes to the regional board or council, depending on if it's a regional committee or a national committee. And council gets the last say, or the regional board, in approving the members and the vice chairs of each committee.
Now, let me ask you a question. In my time on the council, the council or the regional board would be the final say, would be the group that would approve people on committee. But those votes were always pro forma, without any examination of the things that we would now find on a committee application, self-identification of any kind of way, looking at the makeup of a committee to make sure that it is representative of the membership, representative of the particular policy area, representative of anything other than who the chair decides. And the chairs had wide latitude to decide who could or couldn't, who they did or didn't want on their committees. Do you imagine that those debates and those votes are going to remain pro forma?
They haven't already.
Okay.
They've already. So our BLM resolution, our diversity and inclusion retrofit, caused a big change in the room on how we see diversity inside of our own structures. So I will say that I voted against every single committee appointment in the last 2 years. At first, it was because I didn't believe we were diversifying committees. Secondly, it was because we didn't have a process by which to do it. So now we have a process by which to do it so that we know It's not tokenism. It is, let's diversify. Let's make sure that we have enough voices, enough across the boards in all the different types of diversities. Sometimes we get stuck in the idea that diversity is like race. But it's not just that. It is race, it is region, it is age, it is job experience, it is all the things in the room. So our chairs have been tasked, which is part of our resolution in the committee reforms, to make sure that they are diversifying or have a diverse committee. So when every single one of these appointments comes up, I'm looking to see, hey, does this committee look exactly like the old committee? If it does, that's problematic.
Here's a question I actually already know the answer to, but I'm going to make you tell me the answer anyway. There never has been a limit on how many committees a person can sit on. Is there one now?
There sure is.
What is it?
It is 5.
5. So any person, counselor, delegate to the convention, anybody, they can serve on a maximum of 5 committees.
Yes, 5 committees. I was sitting on 18 committees, I believe. At one point, I'm sure you were sitting on maybe that or more.
You and I have had this joking, we weren't actually racing each other, but every time one of us would say, well, I serve on this many committees, invariably the other one of us would pop our head and be like, oh yeah, well, I just signed up for a new one. I have heard from some people who are like us, who have liked to be in a lot of these different rooms simultaneously, serve on a lot of committees, that they are disappointed by this limit on how many committees a person can serve on. From your perspective, as a person who has served on dozens of committees at a time, why is this, or is it not, a good thing?
It's mostly a good thing is because I don't need to be a voice in 18 rooms. I'm good with being a voice in 5 because the other 12 rooms, there's somebody else who can be a voice. So by taking my voice out of the room, you get to put somebody else in that room who is not me. And that is really important, mostly because of the fact that we've made the committees so much smaller. So I am not taking up space in a space that is already finite. And then there's also the idea of we've used, especially at election time, we've used committees in involvement as something to push us as better candidates. And now this says, hey, just because you have more time on your hands, Rashaan, it doesn't mean that you are a better candidate because now you can't, which I think is a really great thing to say, yeah, 5 committees is enough. 5, you don't need more, you don't need less.
It was very generous of you to say Rashaan and not Sid. That was very nice of you. I appreciate it. No, and that's having time. Personally, serving on that many committees means having a significant number of hours per week, per month, per year to give for no pay to help do this policy work. That in many ways is an expression of a person's privilege to be able to do such a thing. But I would tend to agree that limits help. They help people from taking up too much space. And I am certainly a person who is more than happy to be reeled in that way. Especially like you said, now that committees are going to be finite, it does not need to be my voice or your voice or any other individual person's voice taking up that much more space. Committees and action teams, are there limits on how many of those that people can sit on?
Committees, yes, not communities.
I'm sorry, communities and action teams. Those words are very similar to each other. We're going to do some work on separating them in our brains. You can serve on as many communities as you want.
As long as you're a part of the community, as long as you identify that you're a part of the community, that allows, what I equate it to sometimes is, if you want to be on the LGBTQ plus mailing list, anyone can be on the mailing list. And then if something comes in the mail that you want to participate in, you join that thing. And that way you don't always constantly feel like you have to be involved. It allows people to have a give and take. You can take as much as you want, you can give as much as you want, but you're always a part of this thing and you can see what's happening inside of it.
In terms of serving on committees and being parts of communities and action teams, I know for committees, you need to obviously be a member of the union. You need to be a member in good standing, so paid up on your dues, and that would include anybody who is taking advantage of the union's new payment plan. And also, you can't be in conflict of interest as defined by Equity's constitution and bylaws. I am certain we will do a Wonky Weekly at some point on what conflict of interest is. But that, I assume, is all still the case for serving on committees, yes?
Yes, also the case.
Is that so for communities and action teams? Obviously, you need to be a member of the union. I assume you need to be paid up and in good standing. Do you happen to know if conflict of interest is an issue with communities and action teams?
I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know either. So that is something for us to find out. We should report back in our next episode. We'll report back what we find out about conflict of interest as it pertains to communities and action teams. That's a lot right there. That's some wonky stuff. These are big changes at Equity. These are massive changes in the way that we operate. Do you think there's anything we've missed?
If you are currently sitting on a committee, at one point that committee will be brought down to 0. So everyone needs to fill out go to the member portal, go to get involved, and fill out the application for whichever communities, action teams, or committees you'd like to be on. That way, when everything starts to get repopulated, which will happen soonish, in the next month and a half, 2 months, once that happens, committee chairs can repopulate their committees to the sizes at which they would like to. Just remember, make sure you've actually applied. Go and apply. And the other thing is, I don't believe none of the Equity communities currently have their member leader. So if that's something that interests you, if that's something that's really like, oh, I think I would be really great at this, I need a counterpart. So if that's something that's on your mind, also make sure you mention that in your application. And I'll list the Equity communities are BIPOC, chorus, LGBTQ, members with disabilities, minors, which are not young workers, it's a different one.
Right.
Minors are under 17. Parents and caregivers, principals, seniors / old members, older members, stage managers. Then we also have a separate group called trans, non-binary, queer gendered members, which is going to be led by Kate Nelson. They are amazing. And if you want to be part of that community, please, please, please sign up. They are a really, really amazing person. Women's Committee and Young Workers. So any of those, if you feel like you want to be a leader, or if you feel like you just want to put your feet in the pool, it's one of those things where it requires nothing of you until you want it to. And that's how we want our members to be able to participate.
I'll say one last thing, just again, apply. If you are interested in joining a committee, a community, an action team, or you just want to get more information about them, go to the member portal. That's members.actorsequity.org. If I'm super smart, I'll figure out how to put that on the bottom of the screen. At the top of the page, click the Get Involved tab, and it will then pull down a list. Then click Get Involved underneath that as well. So get involved, then get involved, and it will show you the list of committees, communities, and action teams, and then a big button at the bottom that says Apply Now. Do it. Apply. Sign up for something. Please, if you have the time, if you have the ability to give of yourself and be in community with your fellow members in any one of these 3 areas, I encourage you to do it. I know for me, the ability to participate in Equity has been life-changing. I assume it's the same for you, Rashaan. So how about we leave it there? Thank you all so much for joining us for this kickoff pilot episode of Wonky Weekly. Again, I am Sid Solomon.
I'm Rashaan James II.
And I will come up with a better introductory catchphrase for us for the next episode, Rashaan. I promise. All right. Thank you all so much.